Welcome to the Gus Alva Perspective, a video cast earmarked to embrace gratitude, not fear, but gratitude. It's an interesting concept because it's so easy to be sucked into this vortex of fear when we don't know what's going on around us, as opposed to really having an understanding that there's an abundance of things around us that matter greatly. The topic that I'd like to touch on today is having established your better half. What exactly does that mean? Well, the root of what I'd like to touch on is really finding one's soulmate. And this becomes a very important piece because as we mature and as we go through life, it's an amazing thing finding that other half of us who we were destined to be with from time immemorial. So let me walk that back a little bit because obviously we first need to know ourselves before we're ready to commit to someone um, in a monogamous fashion, right? So, in fact, a lot of people have a lot of difficulties with that and oftentimes don't end up meeting somebody that is meaningful to them or that is their better half or that is their soulmate. But a soulmate really should be one's muse and inspiration. It should be a best friend. It should be a partner in good and bad. And that should go beyond the terminology that's oftentimes bandied in religious ceremonies. Uh, it's important that we move beyond settling for just anyone, but being choosy and being picky. And that's where sometimes in having discussions with our children, for example, we can sometimes state, well, don't rush into something and be fully cognizant of what exactly it is that you want because we want somebody to have the same virtues that will help enhance our lives in a collective manner. And it's maybe sometimes a selfish thing. I don't know if you were aware of this, but from a psychiatric perspective, I can share with you some interesting tidbits of information. Major depressive disorder is oftentimes a horrific illness that leads people to think about suicide. But did you know that if you happen to be a male who is married, you have less of a likelihood of committing suicide? Now, unfortunately, the flip side of that is that women who are married have a higher likelihood of then subsequently considering suicide, probably because of the strain that we place on these lovely ladies. But the important issue is that having that support, having that rock, having that anchor to be able to propel ourselves from and be able to accomplish that much more is a very important piece. And not everybody gets the opportunity to experience this. Fortunately, I have had that experience, and I can readily state that, I'm particularly blessed. And oftentimes, will ask the people that come in seeking out my help as to what their relationships look like. Um, why is that important? Well, oftentimes when I ask people, so as to give me a depiction of what their spouse or what their significant other would describe them as, they oftentimes struggle and they oftentimes can't really come up with cogent examples of what that other person would state about them. Now, that sometimes is a bit unsettling because the person that you're with should actually be somebody that you know intimately and that you know very well. Um, Sometimes, though, we get so sucked into all of the different things that are happening around us that we tend to neglect that most important individual that stands with us through thick and thin. And that's where it becomes a very important point to think of the gratitude that we should have and that we should always reveal to that person that matters most. That is the partner with whom we are creating additional memories and families and trying to further the overall sense of ethics and perspectives and virtues and collective wisdom to pass on to future generations. And the key issue here is that, when in our youths, it's important to be able to figure out what exactly is it that I want out of someone that is going to spend the rest of their life with me. And ultimately, not forget the fact that although it gets popularized at the present time that, institutions like marriage aren't necessarily all that important, I would argue against that. And I would actually argue that they are important. They are that bridge that creates the fabric necessary to be able to raise independent children that subsequently have a sense of self worth and that feel secure in their own skin, having had the excellent example of a good couple together. Now, key issue here also is being choosy and certainly thinking things through. We all have a sense of um, love, and our heart sings with young love, and sometimes that can actually be spot on and accurate, and sometimes it's just a fleeting situation. And sometimes the values or the thoughts or the direction of two people don't align. And when that's happening, well, obviously it's important to then move on and consider somebody that will be worthwhile, that will actually help edify and help propel us towards additional desire and additional constructs that will edify our existence and create a greater sense of mirth within us. Making someone else happy is certainly something that we should all strive for, because by doing that, we actually make ourselves equally happy. It's an interesting concept, but sometimes think about this. When you do something that is meaningful for someone else that you have great love for, that bounces back your way in so many ways. And so, in this particular segment, I definitely wanted to call out the fact that for those of us that have had um, the great fortune of meeting one's soulmate, that this is something that we should cherish always, and that we should affirm, and that we should always acknowledge. And because of that, I felt that a very important segment to be able to speak of, because this is something that enhances our life and truly does make us whole. So when you hear that point or that term, my better half, you better believe it's probably an accurate depiction. Thank you for joining us on the Gus Alva Perspective. Stay safe.